I was 68 years old when I found myself driving down Hickory Ridge, a two-lane road I'd driven for decades, but never with my heart pounding the way it did that night. My daughter, Allison, had called me earlier in the evening. Her voice was shaky, the kind of voice a father never forgets. "Dad," she said, "Todd's been acting strange again. I don't feel safe." That was all I needed to hear. I grabbed my jacket, slipped my keys into my pocket, and headed out without telling Linda, my wife of 42 years. I figured I'd explain later, but fate had a different plan for me. The night was quiet, except for the sound of my old truck's tires humming against the pavement. Hickory Ridge had always been a sleepy stretch of road lined with cedar trees, the kind of place where you'd expect peace, not betrayal. I remember checking the dashboard clock as I turned the last bend, 10:47 p.m. That's when I saw it. Parked right at Todd's gate, half hidden under a street lamp, was a car I knew better than my own reflection, Linda's blue Camry. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe she'd come to check on Allison too. Maybe she'd left something at the house. But deep down, a knot in my stomach told me the truth wasn't going to be that kind. I parked my truck down the road and walked back, careful with every step. My knees weren't what they used to be, but that night they carried me silently, fueled by suspicion and dread. I crept closer to the gate, staying hidden behind the trees. Todd's house stood at the end of a long gravel driveway, its windows glowing faintly. And then I heard it, laughter. Not Allison's voice. Not the laughter of a man and his wife at home. It was Linda. I froze, my back against the rough bark of a cedar tree, straining to hear. Her voice was low, but I caught enough. She wasn't talking about Allison. She wasn't there to comfort our daughter. "Just get the paperwork signed," Linda whispered. "Once it's done, we can finally get rid of the old man." My heart stopped. The old man. That was me. For 42 years I'd shared a bed with that woman. Raised a daughter. Built a life out of nothing but sweat and stubbornness. And now, in the dark of night, she was standing with my son-in-law, plotting my end, not in the way of blood or violence, but in something that felt just as final. Erasing me. I pressed my hand against the tree to steady myself. Part of me wanted to storm through that gate, flip the porch light on, and demand answers. But another part, the part that had learned patience from years of hard work and quiet disappointments, told me to wait. Because if I revealed myself too soon, I might lose the one thing I still had, the chance to understand why. I thought I was there to protect my daughter. Instead, I found out my wife and son-in-law were plotting against me. I crouched lower, ears burning, catching fragments of their whispers. Todd's voice was smug, the kind of tone I'd always hated but tried to ignore for Allison's sake. "She trusts me," he said. "She won't even read the fine print. By the time she realizes, everything will already be transferred." Linda chuckled, a sound that now cut through me like glass. "And Earl? He'll never see it coming. He's too old, too tired to fight." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Too old. Too tired. That's what the woman I'd loved for decades thought of me. I don't remember how long I stood there, listening, my mind racing between rage and sorrow. Seconds felt like hours. And then the porch light flicked off. Their voices grew softer as they moved inside. The door shut, leaving me alone under the cold night sky. I staggered back to my truck, knees weak, chest tight. Every memory with Linda replayed in my head. Our first dance, the birth of Allison, the nights we sat on the porch watching fireflies. All of it, now poisoned by the sound of her voice conspiring against me. I gripped the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Do I confront them now? Do I march up that driveway and demand answers? Or do I wait, collect proof, and let their lies hang themselves? Should I storm in right then, or stay hidden to learn the truth? I didn't drive home right away. I sat there for nearly an hour, headlights off, wrestling with every thought a man could have in such a moment. Anger told me to kick the door in. Fear told me to walk away. But something else, something deeper, whispered patience. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's silent, patient, precise. So I started my truck, not to confront them but to plan. Because if Todd and Linda thought I was too old to fight back, they had no idea who they were dealing with. If this were you, would you confront them, or wait? Comment below. Also, if you are yet to subscribe, please do so immediately. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone, because what you are about to hear is something you are not ready for. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me, each rotation reminding me of Linda's whisper, "Get rid of the old man." But there was one word that cut deeper than the rest. Paperwork. That wasn't just talk. That was real. And if it involved Allison, I knew I had to act fast. By sunrise, I was already dressed and driving to town. I had a friend at the bank, Harold, a man I'd known since we were both 20. He'd seen me through better days and I trusted him. I walked up to his desk, leaning heavy on the wood. "Harold," I said, "I need you to look something up for me." Quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "Earl, what's going on?" "I'll tell you one day," I replied. "But right now, I need to know if my daughter signed anything lately. Anything with Todd's name on it." Harold hesitated, then tapped on his keyboard. His frown deepened with every click. After a long pause, he pushed a manila folder across the desk. Inside were copies of documents, legal transfers, signatures, notary stamps. Allison's handwriting right there on the dotted lines. I felt my chest tighten. She had signed away parts of her inheritance. The land I'd worked my whole life to protect for her, slipping into Todd's hands. I thanked Harold and walked out, the folder heavy in my grip, heavier still in my heart. That night, I decided I couldn't wait for answers to come to me. I had to follow them. I parked across from Todd's office, engine off, lights down, watching. Hours passed until finally I saw Linda's Camry pull up. She wasn't going to see Allison. She wasn't worried about her daughter at all. She was there for Todd. I watched them leave together, laughing like teenagers sneaking off to prom. My jaw clenched as I tailed them through back roads until they pulled into a rundown motel just outside town. The two of them disappeared inside, leaving me sitting in the shadows of my truck, heart pounding with betrayal. It wasn't just paperwork. It wasn't just fraud. My wife, the woman I'd spent 4 decades beside, was sleeping with my daughter's husband. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I should have gone in there, dragged them out, made a scene. But I didn't. Because every fiber of my being told me, patience. If I rushed it, they'd cover their tracks. But if I waited, I could destroy them both. Hours later, I drove back toward Todd's neighborhood. His house sat quiet, the lights dimmed, but something caught my eye. A figure leaned against the hood of a black sedan parked a few houses down. A young woman, blonde, maybe late 20s. She wasn't dressed like a neighbor, she was dressed sharp, businesslike. In her hand, a phone glowed. She was scrolling through something, then dialing, then snapping the phone shut with a look of frustration. I stayed back watching. A few minutes later, Todd pulled up, alone this time. He barely noticed her until she stepped right in front of his car. He slammed the brakes, rolled the window down, and from my distance I could see his face go pale. They argued. She waved her phone in his face, jabbing it like a weapon. I couldn't hear the words, but the message was clear. She had something on him. Something big enough to make him sweat. I leaned forward, gripping the dashboard. Who was she? She wasn't Allison. She wasn't Linda. She was someone new. And by the way Todd looked ready to crawl out of his skin, she had proof that could bury him. I thought my wife's affair was the betrayal, but another woman appeared out of the shadows. Todd got out of the car, trying to calm her down. He reached for her arm, but she pulled back sharply, holding her phone up higher, almost taunting him. Then she slipped something into her purse and stormed off toward her sedan. Todd stood there for a long moment, looking around nervously before finally heading inside his house. I stayed put, heart racing. Who was that woman? A mistress? An enemy? A partner turned rival? And what did she have on him that gave her that much confidence? She wasn't Allison, so who was she? And what proof was she hiding? I drove home in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on me. My wife was in a motel with my son-in-law. My daughter was unknowingly giving away her inheritance. And now some mysterious blonde had stepped into the picture with leverage I didn't understand. The pieces were starting to fit together, but not into any picture I could recognize yet. As I pulled into my driveway, I shut the engine off and just sat there in the dark. The old me, The man I'd been for decades, wanted to walk away, pretend none of this was happening. But the man sitting in that truck, 68 years old, betrayed and tired of being underestimated, he knew different. I was going to find out who that woman was. And I was going to find out what she knew. Because if Todd and Linda thought they were writing the ending to my story, they were about to learn that I still held the pen. If you were in my shoes, would you do the same? Would you try to work with a stranger just to find the truth? Let me know in the comments. The morning after I saw that blonde woman threatening Todd, I decided it was time to check on Allison face to face. I knocked gently on her door. She looked tired, eyes red, like she hadn't slept in days. She forced a smile, but I could tell it was only for my sake. "Dad," she said, "Todd's been so busy with work. He keeps telling me not to worry, but I can't shake this feeling." I sat down across from her at the kitchen table. "Allison," I said carefully, "has Todd asked you to sign anything lately? Papers, contracts, anything at all?" She hesitated. Her hands fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweater. Yeah. A few weeks ago. He said it was just routine stuff. He told me not to bother reading it, that it was all legal jargon." My heart sank. "Do you still have the papers?" I asked. She got up and dug through a drawer, pulling out a neat stack of documents. I took one look and my stomach dropped. Her signature was there, clear as day. She'd signed away control of her inheritance. The land. The savings. Everything I'd worked my entire life to secure for her. "Allison," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you realize what this means?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, are you saying Todd tricked me?" I didn't want to crush her completely, but I couldn't lie. I nodded slowly. That moment will stay with me forever. The way her face fell, the way her shoulders shook as she realized the man she trusted most had stolen from her. I pulled her into a hug, and for the first time in years she felt like my little girl again. But I knew comfort wasn't enough. I needed answers. And I needed to know who that blonde woman was. So I started tailing her. It wasn't hard. She drove a black sedan, sharp and polished, the kind of car that didn't fit in with Hickory Ridge. I followed her into town, keeping a few cars back, until she pulled into an office building on the corner of Main Street. The sign outside read, "Hayes and Associates Law Offices." The name hit me like a thunderclap. Years ago, Judge Hayes had warned me about Todd. He told me the man was slick, always scheming, and not to let him get too close to my daughter. I hadn't listened. I'd wanted to believe my daughter's choice was hers to make. Now here I was, staring at the office of his daughter, Megan Hayes. I waited until she stepped out of her car, heels clicking against the pavement, and walked inside with a folder tucked under her arm. That was no mistress. She was a lawyer's daughter, and she had every reason in the world to bring Todd down. Later that evening, I walked into a small diner across town, the kind of place where people minded their own business. I slid into a booth and ordered black coffee. 10 minutes later, she walked in. She spotted me instantly, narrowed her eyes, then cautiously made her way over. "You've been following me," she said flatly. I didn't bother denying it. "Yes. And I need to know what you have on Todd." She studied me for a long moment, then pulled out her phone. With a few taps, she played a recording. Todd's voice filled the booth. "Once Allison signs, we'll move everything offshore. By the time her old man figures it out, she'll be broke and I'll be long gone." I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. Megan paused the recording. "That's just one of many," she said. "He thinks he can outsmart me, but I've been building a case. He's knee-deep in fraud and your wife's helping him." I felt my chest burn. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Because men like Todd ruin lives. And because my father warned people like you years ago, but no one listened. Now I'm going to make sure Todd doesn't get away with it." That's when I realized this wasn't just about betrayal, it was fraud, blackmail, and something far bigger. I leaned back in the booth, mind racing. This wasn't just about Allison's inheritance anymore. It wasn't just about my wife's affair. This was a web of fraud, deception, and greed that stretched further than I'd imagined. Megan slid a flash drive across the table. "Here," she said. "Recordings, bank statements, emails. Enough to bury him if you use it right." I stared at the drive, then back at her. Why give this to me? She smirked. Because you're the one Todd underestimated most. He thinks you're just an old man in the way. That makes you the perfect one to take him down. The woman holding the proof was the daughter of a judge, and Todd had no idea I was onto him. I pocketed the drive and finished my coffee in silence. Walking out of that diner, I felt the weight of it all pressing on me. My daughter betrayed, my wife corrupted, and now this woman, the daughter of a judge, putting weapons in my hands. For the first time in days I felt something other than despair. I felt resolve. Todd thought he was clever. Linda thought I was too old. But they had no idea that patience is a weapon too, and I'd been sharpening mine for a lifetime. What would you do in my shoes? Expose Todd right away or gather more evidence? Let me know. I'd spent my life avoiding shady deals and backroom bargains. But that night, sitting across from Megan Hayes in a quiet diner off Route 11, I realized sometimes the only way to beat a snake is to partner with one that's already circling the pit. Megan smirked, but her voice carried no humor. Your son-in-law isn't just cheating on his wife and scamming her inheritance. He's running money through shell companies. Fake names. Offshore accounts. He's desperate, Earl. That's why he pushed Allison into signing those documents. He needs liquidity before the walls close in. I made a deal with the woman blackmailing my son-in-law. Don't blame me, I'm just trying to protect my daughter. Her words sank in like lead weights. Fraud. Embezzlement. Money laundering. Todd wasn't just a snake in my family garden. He was a criminal trying to pull my daughter into his schemes. I took a deep breath, holding her gaze. And you? What do you get out of this? Her jaw tightened. Insurance. Todd thought he could toy with me, use me. He underestimated me. This drive protects me. If he goes down, I go free. It made sense, but it didn't make her trustworthy. You realize, I said slowly, if I use this, I'm not just taking down Todd. I'm exposing my wife too. She's tied up in his mess, whether she knows it or not. Megan's eyes softened just a fraction. Then you've got a harder choice than me. We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the diner's neon sign buzzing above us. I could feel the weight of decades in my bones, 42 years of marriage, one daughter I'd die for, and a storm building that could shatter everything. Finally, Megan broke the silence. You've got the files. The question is, Earl, do you have the stomach to use them? I didn't answer. Not yet. But inside, I knew. When the time came, I'd use every last piece of ammunition to protect Allison. Back home, I locked myself in my study, laptop glowing in the dark. One by one, I opened the files. Emails between Todd and offshore banks. Shell companies registered to fake addresses. Wire transfers that didn't make sense. And then the recordings. Todd's voice, smooth and smug, talking about cleaning dirty money through Allison's inheritance. I pressed pause, leaned back, and rubbed my eyes. My chest felt tight, but not from age or stress. From rage. This wasn't about Linda anymore. This wasn't just about betrayal and a marriage. This was about a man using my daughter, my flesh and blood, as a shield for his crimes. Her files showed something uglier than I ever imagined. The next morning, I sat across from Megan again, this time in a booth near the window. Sunlight streaked across her face, but her expression was unreadable. I've gone through the files, I told her. You weren't exaggerating. He's drowning in fraud. She nodded. And now you see why I've been playing this game. Todd isn't just a cheater, he's dangerous. He's desperate. Men like that? They burn everyone around them before they fall. I clenched my fists under the table. I don't care if he burns himself. But he won't drag Allison down with him. Megan tilted her head, studying me again. You're not like most fathers I've met in cases like this. Most would throw themselves at the problem, storm in, get emotional, and lose. You're calculating. Patient. I gave a bitter smile. I learned a long time ago that in war you don't charge blindly. You wait for the opening. And when it comes, you strike hard. She leaned closer. Then we're on the same side. That night, I sat on my porch, bourbon in hand, staring out at the dark Tennessee woods. The cicadas hummed, and for a brief moment I thought about the life I'd wanted after retirement. Peace, quiet, family dinners. Instead, I was preparing for battle again. But this time the battlefield wasn't overseas. It was my own home. I thought of Allison's tearful face, her trust in me, her belief that I could fix this. And I thought of Linda, the woman I'd shared 4 decades with, sneaking into motels with the man who wanted me gone. The rage was there, sharp and hot. But so was patience. I'd let them think the old man was blind. I'd let them underestimate me. And when the time came, I'd turn Megan's files into the hammer that shattered their scheme. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in 68 years, it's this. Revenge isn't about noise. It's about timing. Would you trust Megan? Comment trust or no trust. I copied Allison's documents, secured Megan's flash drive in a fireproof box, and then went about the act I'd perfected over a lifetime, playing the harmless old man. I put on the same tired smile I'd used when folks tried to sell me unnecessary insurance. I made small talk. I watered the roses. I acted like a man who had no idea his world was about to fall apart. That performance felt foreign in my bones at first, but it worked. Linda let her guard down around me. Todd started to act like his usual charming self when I was in the room. Allison kept talking about work and the kids, the way she always did, crossing the room with a tray of coffee like nothing had changed. If you could read people the way I can, you'd know they believed I'd never see through their act. That gave me the advantage. We planned the Sunday dinner with casual precision. Nothing flashy, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the kind of small talk that makes families feel normal. I invited them all under the pretense of keeping things simple. Megan agreed to be there quietly. She promised to arrive toward the end, to make sure Todd didn't slip away. We chose Allison's house because it was neutral ground, the place where hurt would land heaviest. I spent Saturday going over the files. Every recording. Every wire transfer. Every email. I picked the ones that told the clearest story, Todd's voice admitting what he planned, bank statements showing money moving where it shouldn't, a few texts that proved Linda wasn't merely in love with a liar but was helping him manipulate the paperwork. I rehearsed how I'd speak, calm, measured, no theatrics. Anger is loud, and loud gets you nowhere when you need the law and the truth on your side. When Sunday came, I dressed in my best shirt and a jacket that still smelled faintly of cedar from the cabinet where I kept it. Linda kissed my cheek like she always did before a family meal. Her hand was warm. I swallowed the bile that rose in my throat and smiled as though nothing in my life had shifted. We sat down. The conversation flowed for a while. Weather, work, Allison's garden. Todd carved the chicken with a practiced ease that made me want to throw the plate at his head. Instead, I waited. I waited until the moment when the noise thinned and all eyes were on the ordinary, trusting space between us. Then I set the laptop on the table and hit play. Todd's voice came through, dry and confident. Once Allison signs, we'll move everything offshore. By the time anyone notices, it'll be too late. The recording echoed in the dining room like a verdict. Allison's fork clattered. Linda's face drained of color. For a second, the room was so quiet I could hear the furnace kick on. Todd's hand froze midair, a slice of carved chicken suspended between plate and mouth. He laughed, a sound meant to cut through the discomfort, but no one joined him. I let that silence do the work. Then I played the next clip, a conversation about shell companies, names and wire transfers. I pulled up the bank statements and pushed them across the table, letting the paper speak where words might be filtered. Todd stammered, tried the old defenses. It's edited. It's out of context. But the emails lined up like a trail of evidence, and the transfers matched the talk on the recordings. Megan arrived as I finished the third clip, slipping into the doorway with a kind of quiet confidence that told me she'd seen men like Todd fall apart before. She placed more documents on the table. Notarized records, account numbers, the kind of professional proof even a slick mouth couldn't deny. For a brief, raw moment, Todd looked like a man who had been stripped of his costume. The bravado left him and what remained was a man facing consequences he hadn't planned for. Linda didn't stand to defend him. She sat frozen, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. Allison's hands gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles whitened. I remember thinking of all the nights I'd made sure Allison had steady shoes, a hot meal, and a place to come home to. I remembered feeling small and powerless more than once in my life. Vietnam will do that to a man, but this time, I had something to offer other than anger. I had proof. I had a plan. But when you set a trap, you always have to expect something unexpected. Halfway through the next recording, someone began pounding on the front door. A neighbor or someone who'd overheard the voices. For a breathless second, my chest tightened with the fear that the plan might fall apart. Todd's face went white. He bolted for the hallway, muttering frantic things that meant nothing. I moved like the man I'd always been trained to be, slow, deliberate. I stood and blocked the doorway. "If you go, you'll make yourself look guilty," I said, voice low. "Sit down." He hesitated, then sank into a chair, all the fight gone. Whoever was at the door left, or perhaps the knockout evidence had been enough to scare off curious ears. Either way, the moment passed and the room returned to the heavy quiet. After what felt like hours, Allison stood. Her voice was steady but small when she said, "I want him out of my house." The words landed like a hammer. Todd tried to bargain, to explain, to charm his way back into forgiveness. But truth, once played loud enough, doesn't hide behind lies. When he finally left, suitcase in hand, rage and panic making his steps uneven, the house felt different. The air had been cleared, and the mess was visible for everyone to see. Linda didn't follow him. She didn't cry out for him. She sat there, broken in a way that no apology could fix. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow and exhausted, like a man who'd led a long life into one final necessary fight. The plan had worked. The evidence held. But I'd exposed more than a criminal. I'd exposed the woman I'd loved for 4 decades. I walked out into the cool evening and leaned against my truck. The sky was clear and the stars indifferent. In the quiet that followed, I thought about what had been lost and what might yet be salvaged. There would be lawyers, police reports, and long nights rewriting our lives. There would be a cost. But in that moment, with the trap sprung and the truth laid bare, I allowed myself a small, steady breath. I had protected Allison. The rest, the picking up of broken pieces and the building of new bearings, would follow as it always does, slowly, painfully, and with time. One wrong move and I'd lose my daughter, my marriage, and my proof. Predict this. Will my plan succeed, or backfire? Drop your guess. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it arrives in the shuffle of papers and the slam of a courtroom gavel. A month after that Sunday dinner, Todd was indicted. Megan's recordings, the bank statements, the notarized transfers. All of it painted a picture too clear for even his lawyers to smear. He strutted into the courthouse like a man sure he could buy his way out. But this time money wasn't on his side. The evidence was. Allison annulled the paperwork she'd signed under his lies. With Megan's help, she reclaimed every penny of her inheritance, and Todd's accounts were frozen faster than he could move them. For once, his slick tongue had no power. But while the law was busy wrapping him in its coils, my home life unraveled quietly. Linda didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't even fight me. 1 week after Todd's arrest, I came home to find her suitcase by the door. She said she was ashamed of what she'd done, ashamed she'd been caught, ashamed she'd chosen him over me. Ashamed, but not sorry. She kissed Allison on the forehead, then walked out of the house we'd shared for 42 years. And just like that, the woman I'd built my life beside became a ghost I wouldn't chase. I won, but the cost was heavy. I left too not long after. The memories inside that house were too loud, too bitter. I retreated to my cabin in Sevier County, tucked into the woods where the mist hangs low over the ridges in the morning. Out there, silence felt like medicine. I stacked wood, brewed strong coffee on the porch, and listened to the whippoorwills at dusk. Alone. But finally free. People think revenge means fists, shouting, blood in the dirt. I've lived long enough to know better. Revenge, when it's done right, is patience. It's letting liars weave their own rope. It's letting greed expose itself without you lifting more than a steady hand. Todd thought he could erase me. Linda thought I was too old to see the truth. They were both wrong. What hurt wasn't losing them, it was realizing I'd already lost them long before that night. The moment Linda whispered in his ear, the moment Allison's trust was used against her, my family was no longer whole. Justice didn't restore it. Justice only cleared the wreckage so Allison and I could build something new. Would you trade justice for the family you once had? I sit on that porch sometimes and ask myself the same question. Would I have rather lived blind, smiling across the table at people I thought I knew, never hearing Todd's voice plotting my erasure? Would ignorance have been easier than truth? Maybe. But ignorance doesn't protect your daughter's future. Ignorance doesn't stop a thief. Ignorance only makes the fall harder when it comes. No, I wouldn't trade justice. Not even for the family I once thought I had. Allison visits me every Sunday now. She brings the kids. We eat simple meals, laugh about small things, and never talk about Todd unless the court drags his name back into the papers. She's healing piece by piece. And me? I'm learning what it means to be alone without being lonely. The old man didn't go quietly. He didn't rage either. He waited, he watched, and when the time was right, he let their own greed destroy them. That's the lesson I want you to take from this story. Revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's water, slow, patient, and unstoppable. If my story taught you patience is sometimes the sharpest weapon, share this video. And subscribe to Sweet and Sour Revenge, where every story stings but every story teaches.